Life Management Science Labs would like to acknowledge that we live and produce this podcast on the traditional lands of the Wurundjeri people. We'd also like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands of our listeners and our international colleagues. We'd like to pay our respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging. Hello everyone, and welcome to Work in Progress, the Personal Productivity Science Insights podcast produced by LMSL, the Life Management Science Labs. We are champions of life management science, providing structured insights informed by science and inspired by practice on key aspects of conscious living. Each week, we bring you scientific and practical insights on each element with the expert knowledge of professionals in the field. I am your host, Joanna. Let's get started. Hi guys, and welcome back to Work in Progress. I am your host, Joanna, and today we will be talking about how we can improve our decision making to maximize our productivity. Today I'm joined by Guillermo Campitelli, who is a professor at Murdoch University in Perth. Hi Guillermo, how are you today?
Hi Joanna, how are you?
Good, thank you. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much for inviting me.
Yeah, of course. Would you like to start off by introducing yourself with a bit about who you are and what it is you do?
Yes, I'm Guillermo Campitelli. I am a Prof. Chancellor in Health and Education here at Murdoch University. And my background is in psychology. So I've got a Ph.D. in psychology. My research is in expertise and decision-making. I specialized on expertise in chess. So I was wondering how chess players make decisions. And then I moved to generalize that to the general population. So how everyone makes decisions and makes judgments about things in the world.
Yeah, amazing. And I also know you've done some study and work outside of Australia. Can you tell us a bit about that?
Yes, I'm originally from Argentina. That's where I did my degree in psychology, and I started investigating chess players and their decision-making processes and memory, problem solving, and then I went to the UK, to the University of Nottingham, to do a PhD, and I continued my studies with chess experts, and I did fMRI studies as functional magnetic resonance imaging. So basically, I wanted to know which areas of the brain are activated when chess players look at chess positions. I looked at the eye movements, so where do they pay attention to, and all sorts of behavioral tasks, with the idea of understanding how they make decisions. And typically, that is also used as a model of how people make decisions in general.
Yeah, amazing. Thank you for sharing that. I'm really excited to get into more of that with our questions as well. But before that, I'd love to get to know you more with a few get to know our guest questions. So I'll start off by asking you if you've got a favorite book or any ones that you recommend to us.
Yeah, so this is the first book I read when I went to the UK. It's a book by Daniel Dennett, who is a philosopher, and the book is Consciousness Explained. And basically, this is the book that introduced me to an area of psychology and philosophy, which is what is consciousness, how consciousness emerges in evolution, and etc. So that's a book that was. Although I disagree in a lot of things with Daniel Dennett, this is a book that was very important in the way of thinking for me. And my whole career, I started to think in terms of not just the specific experiments that I'm doing, but what are the implications in a more global sense of how, in my case, how the mind works. And so that was it's a really, really important book for me.
Yeah, amazing. And do you normally read a lot of nonfiction?
Yes, I only read nonfiction.
Yeah.
And now I'm mainly listening. So I don't have too much time for reading, and so when I'm commuting to work, I listen to Audible all non-fiction books.
Yeah, are you into podcasts at all?
Yes. So I'm more into books than in podcasts, but I do listen to podcasts, and one of my favorites is Sean Carroll's podcast is Mindscape. Sean Carroll is a theoretical physicist, and but his podcast, he interviews people in philosophy, psychology, social sciences, biology, genetics. He's very, very interesting, and himself is a very prolific theoretician in physics, in fundamental physics, and I'm very interested in these topics.
Yeah, amazing. And in terms of like TV series, is there anything that you like to watch?
Yeah, so again, this was probably the first series in outside my country that I watched. It was Dr. House. That's the analytic thinking that goes into Dr. House, and that attracts me. It's very what I like to do in my life, try to be analytic, and probably will come in some of the questions. So that was a really nice series to watch.
Yeah, and what's that one about?
So Dr. House is it's a doctor in a hospital and who receives very complex cases, and the group needs to come to a diagnosis of what's suffering the patient suffering, and then they come up with some hypothesis of what's going on, what could be going on, and then they try some medication, then doesn't work. So then based on that they eliminate potential diagnosis. So they need to come up with another diagnosis, and until they get it right. So that is a bit of what we scientists do, and so that's why it was very interesting for me to watch.
Yeah, is this an American TV show?
Yeah, American.
Yeah, I think I know what you're talking about. I've watched like 1 or 2 seasons of it, and it's really good. Yeah, it's a really good show. So that's a great one. And do you have a famous role model in your life, or even just anyone that you personally know that inspires you?
Yeah, so perhaps my role model is not famous. He won a Nobel Prize in 1978. Is Herbert Simon, and he's a person who was a polymath, and he developed a theory of that is called boundary rationality, and based on that theory, he won the Nobel Prize in economics. That influenced my research into decision making, because he said he studied a lot of things. He was the founding fathers of artificial intelligence, the field of cognitive psychology, economics. But he said that he only had one thing in mind. He studied all these things, but with only one thing in mind, which was how people make decisions. So that inspired me, and that's why I'm very interested in how people make decisions. And so that was, in a sense, the role model.
Yeah, beautiful. Thank you for sharing that with us. And I'd love to just get into our interview questions now. So my first one for you is, over the course of your experience, how would you personally define personal productivity?
Yeah, so productivity is typically associated with some products. So how you come up with producing something. Now, I like to think of that as thoughts to be also products, but probably you can't see those thoughts. So when you come up with an idea that may take a long time to develop, that is also a product. I like to think of a product. So in a sense, when I talk to consider what productivity is, not only I think of ideas as products, but also I'm interested in the process, more on the final outcome. So when I think if I'm being productive, perhaps I have a day in which I didn't accomplish anything, but I was thinking and trying to produce ideas, and when you're trying to produce something complex, you may not achieve anything in a particular day. So, was I productive that day? If I think on the outcome only, I didn't produce anything. But if I thinking, well, did I pay attention? Was I concentrated all the time, or was I distracted? Did I make good decisions on which options to consider? And if the answer is yes, I would be happy, and I'd be considering that I was productive that day, even though there was no outcome. And you sometimes, if you think that productivity is only related to outcomes, then you thought, oh, that was a very useless day. But in fact, the outcome will come in the future if you were productive in the sense of being concentrated and making good decisions on what to think and what to consider, what to not consider.
Yeah, and would you say that you're still productive even if you haven't accomplished the tasks that you wanted to do for the day?
Yes, so that's something that as something that a philosophy that I follow, or a technique that I follow, is that I tend to put myself goals that are more challenging. So they are challenging to achieve, and or even not goals, but tasks that I said, okay, this day I'm going to do all these tasks, even though I know that it's very difficult that I would be able to do all these tasks. But I put that as to challenge myself. So at the end of the day, I said, well, of these 10 tasks that I was going to do, I did 7. So it may sound that it may be considered a failure. But in fact, if I was realistic at the beginning, perhaps I just put only 5 tasks. So in this way, I did 7. I didn't achieve the goal, but I did more than if I was realistic. So because I challenged myself. Now, the important thing when you follow that approach is that you don't feel bad because you didn't achieve the 10 tasks. But I do that, and I don't feel bad as long as that I feel that the process was good. The process that I wasn't. I was concentrated all the time. I didn't lose time. I didn't waste time. And I could make choices of what to do at each time.
Yeah, amazing. And I think that approach is a great one to have and requires a lot of awareness as well, which I'm sure we'll get into as we talk more about decision making. But I'd also like to ask you if there are any misconceptions when it comes to productivity.
Perhaps what I said before is that you are only productive when you have a final outcome, and so to me that's a misconception. If your process was appropriate, then that to me should be considered that you are productive.
Yeah, great. And how would you go on to then define decision making?
Okay, so decision making is it's any situation in which you have you're presented with more than one option, and then you need to choose one of the options. Now, one thing that I'd like to say here is that, and that we're talking about misconceptions, perhaps this is one in decision making, is that not doing something should be considered a choice. And so, because sometimes we need to decide whether to do something, and that's one choice. But the other choice is not to do that. And typically, doing something is considered that you made a decision. Okay, I made a decision to do something. But if I don't do that, it's not considered a decision. It's considered that you didn't do anything, that you didn't make a decision. Now, this may seem a little bit of pedantic, but I think it's important because when in some situations, like perhaps you need to decide on whether to take a new job, a new opportunity, and then you start thinking, okay, what are the benefits and what are the costs of taking this new job? And then you consider that perhaps it's good or bad, whatever. But you need to compare that to to maintain the job that you have now. So you need to consider, if you decide to remain in the job you have now, the benefits and the costs as well. And then, only then, you compare the two options. And why this is important? Because maybe the option of taking the new job was not so good, but when you compare with remaining in the current job, then it becomes really good, because the current situation is not a good one. So, and likewise, it could be that when you analyze a potential new job, you decide, oh, this is really good. But then you need to compare to the current job, because perhaps your current job is even better than what you're thinking of. So I think that is some misconceptions that you get in decision making, and which is not giving consideration to the option of doing nothing. That is actually should be an active decision of doing nothing.
Yeah, for sure. And in terms of for the example you gave with jobs, what if someone decides to take the new job and then they think they've made the wrong decision, and then they're looking back on the job they had and thinking that one's better? How do you go about dealing with making the wrong decision?
Okay, so what a very important concept in decision making is what is called sunk costs. Sunk costs are costs that you had in the past, and to make a decision. So yes, in order to take a new job, you have to sacrifice some things, and you made an investment. Maybe you have to rent a new house in a different place, and many different things that is cost. And because you did that, then you say, well, I need to stay in this job regardless of what happens, because I made all these sacrifices, so I need to stick to this. So one thing that it's a concept in decision making, economics, and also I learned from studying chess players and being a chess player, is that it doesn't matter what happened in the past. If from now you analyze decisions, and the decision could be to return to the previous job, or to stay on the new job, or to go somewhere else. So you analyze costs and benefits of these three options, and then if the best option is to return to the previous job, then that's your decision you need to make, regardless of if you think in terms of, okay, I was in that job, then I left, and then I returned. I wasted a lot of money or resources and time. So you feel that you made a mistake, but the mistake was the first one, not the second one. So that's very important to always think from now, what's my best option, without considering how did you get to that situation.
Yeah, I really like that. I like that idea of like the second one is not a mistake, was it?
Not,
The first one is? Yeah, I really like
yes.
that concept, and like not focusing on like the past, but more where you can go from here. I think that's a really important takeaway.
Yeah.
And then how would you say that productive decision making influences our personal productivity?
Yeah. So we make decisions all the time. So every minute we make decisions. We make decisions on what to eat or what to pay attention to, and so if we pay attention to things that are not useful, then that the decision making affects productivity. So, but the important thing here to me is that if we, by having this mindset of thinking that that we are making decisions every minute, is that we become more self-aware of what we are doing. Now, the problem could be that you are so self-aware of what you are doing that you paralyze. So we should never get to that stage. So basically, being reflective of what we are doing, but being also forgiving towards yourself. So if you realize that, well, I'm just not paying attention to this, and I'm not being productive, then don't be nice to yourself. You shouldn't just be too harsh to yourself, and just say, okay, well, now I have the opportunity to change that. So from now on, doesn't matter what I did in the past. So now I make the decision to focus on this or that. So in that sense, it's just a mindset of decision, that we are making decisions all the time that helps us to focus more on what we are doing, and that will affect productivity.
Yeah, that's great. And in terms of like decision making, what are some of the key factors that causes people to be indecisive?
Well, so when you ask me about the role model, I mentioned Herbert Simon. Herbert Simon had this idea that in order to how people make decisions is completely different than the traditional models that the mainstream economics developed about decision making. So basically, the traditional economic models are that the people are rational decision makers, and they consider all the possible options, then base the option that is best, then that's chosen. And well, so that's an idea that is, although it sounds like not a very good idea, but and nobody would say that, because we know that we make mistakes all the time, and we are not rational all the time. But in the models, in the economic theory, they are embedded in those models. So implicitly, it is assumed that we do that. So Herbert Simon says, in fact, we don't do that. It wouldn't be rational to do that either, because if you say, okay, I'm going to consider 10 possible options, and then I start to giving a score to these possible options. Well, the time that it takes to do that should be taken into account. And sometimes the time it takes to do that is much more than the time you have to make that decision. So that would be one way of why people are indecisive, because they wouldn't make a decision until they have full information of the situation. And so Herbert Simon studied chess players to see how they make decisions. And what he found was that chess players don't analyze all the possible options. What they do is they set what you call a satisfaction level. So basically, if I find an option that reaches this threshold of satisfaction, then I choose that option. So that may be the first option, maybe the second, the third, the fourth. So, but it's not that I'm going to analyze all the options and then compare, but when one option becomes reasonable enough or satisfactory enough for the chess player, they do choose that one. And that's because they have a time pressure to make decisions. So if you had an infinite amount of time, then you should consider all the options. But if you don't, then you need to make those informed decisions. So one reason why people are indecisive is because they are scared of making decisions without full information. And I return to what I said before. Not making the decision is a decision as well. So you need to also consider what are the costs of not making that decision.
Yeah. And do you think people gain more clarity after they've made a decision, that they can see things more clearly after they've decided what to do?
Yeah, so that's a very nice question. So they get information. So when they make a decision, then they can see the consequences, and perhaps you have it in your mind. Or well, what happens if I do this? And you never do it. You never see what are the actual consequences. So yes, it provides you information, and then you can incorporate that into your thinking, and then to keep improving your situation with better decisions in the future.
Yeah. And do you think that overthinking plays a big part in decision making?
Yes, but so the one thing that concept that comes to my mind is the meta decision making. So basically, sometimes we need to make some processes that lead us to make a decision. But another that thing that I'm studying in my research is at a different level. Do I have to actually spend some time in this situation and then execute the processes that will lead to a decision, or not? This is not relevant at this stage, and I have to shouldn't pay any time to this situation. Rather, I have to focus on something else. So that's something that I'm studying now with the using virtual reality. I created a task with some colleagues here at Murdoch University, or in which we asked participants to play they are in an arcade, and they have the option to choose to whatever game they want, and then they gain tickets by playing the games. But what we are interested in is not how many tickets they gain, but whether they make the right decisions. So when they get the information that something and that one of the games is very profitable, they are getting a lot of tickets, they actually should stay there. Or the other way around, if they acquire the information that they're earning very few tickets there, then they should move to go to explore other games. And so you were talking about overthinking. If you don't know, if you're thinking, okay, maybe I should go there, then you're wasting a lot of time, and then in this game that we have created, you're losing points by overthinking what would be the best. And then sometimes the best option is to choose one option, go to that, and get information about that. So yes, overthinking, it's a problem. It's not the only one, but it's one of the problems that lead to people to make mistakes in decision making.
Yeah, and back to your virtual reality game, what inspired you to want to create that?
Interestingly, I was playing with my kids a video game. It was Overcooked, and basically what I realized that my kids were much better than me in the execution. But what I realized is that I was having an oversight of, okay, these are the tasks that should be done in this order. So I was actually saying, oh, you do this, you do that. And they were very good at what they were doing, and I was really bad at what I was doing. But I was good at determining what should be done at which stage. So then when I told this story to my colleagues, and based on that, we came up with the idea of the arcade, which is something similar in terms of you have several tasks, and then you have to decide where to go. So we were measuring that component, not whether the decisions at the local level are correct, but whether someone has a global understanding of the situation. So that's what inspired me to do that. And virtual reality is that's because typically in decision making, the tasks we have to do research are very artificial. So they are vignettes with situations that we tell people, okay, you are in this situation, and what decision would be appropriate. So, but we were interested in decision making in the real world. And for example, our funding body was about submarines, and so how people make decisions in submarines, but actually in any real life situation that requires that is safety critical. For example, if you're a air traffic controller or a atomic nuclear plant operator, said that you have to make decisions in the wild, not just in a desk and with information, with abstract or numerical information, but you are there doing things, or firefighters are in another case. So we thought, well, the problem of investigating those situations is that you can only do research until when something serious happens. Instead of doing that, so we use virtual reality to create a situation that is a sort of realistic. It's not the real thing, but it's much better than just being in your computer and reading something. But at the same time, we can control the situations, and we can in 45 minutes measure the capacity to meta decision making.
Yeah, I really like that idea of simulating reality as a way of discovering more about decision making. I think that's a really cool concept. I'd also like to ask you about another concept. Would you be able to tell us what Bayesian inference is?
Yeah, so that's something that I'm involved right now. So I do research in Bayesian inference, and so basically this is a type of reasoning in which people have to use probabilities to make a judgment. And And basically, we are really bad. We are really, really bad at making those judgments. We are okay with dealing with probabilities, but when we have to deal with what is called conditional probabilities, which is what's the probability of something if something else happened? So you need to consider what was the probability of the first thing, and then within that, what's the probability of the second thing? We get confused. So what I am trying to develop is a visual aid in the form of a grid with shapes that allows people to understand what is required to do in that type of reasoning, and guide their judgments. So actually, again, what inspired me to do that is that I struggle as well. So when I am presented with these situations that require probabilistic thinking, even though I teach statistics, I deal with probabilities all the time, I also get confused. So I said, well, if I get confused, I want to understand this. So I created a visual aid that helps me to solve those problems. And I'm trying to see whether that can help train students or whoever needs to deal with these sort of problems. That's a very typical problem that doctors are that have to deal with when they have to advise their patients in whether they have to go through surgery. Okay, so what's the probability of success of the surgery? That's, you can give that piece of information. But when you talk about what's the probability of the success, given that this person has these specific characteristics, then that changes completely. And so even doctors struggle with understanding that type of information. Another thing it was in the media a lot when we had the COVID vaccination was whether said there were some newspapers that were saying that the vaccination wasn't effective because a lot of people that were in the hospitals were vaccinated. Well, the problem is that that didn't take into account what we call the base rate, which was the percentage of people that already were vaccinated. And that was a time that vaccination was very, very massive. So most people were vaccinated. So when you go at the hospital and you see how many people are vaccinated, how many people are not, you are going to see more people vaccinated. That's because there are more people vaccinated in the country. And that doesn't mean that the vaccination is not effective. And in fact, it was the opposite. And so understanding that is really important for providing information to the public and ourselves. When we understand how to use probabilities, we can make more better decisions. When doctors tell us what's the probability of success for a surgery or this test, what's the probability that if you test positive in this test that you will have the disease that you are exploring.
Yeah, and what are some other benefits that using probability can bring towards enhancing decision making?
Okay, so returning to Bayesian reasoning, which is that uses probability, but it uses it in an interesting way, which is this. So in Bayesian reasoning, you start with a what is called a prior belief. So that is how much you believe that something will happen, and you use probabilities for that. And you can say, okay, well, based on the information I have, then the probability of this happening is 50%, and the probability of not happening is 50%. And then you acquire new information, And basically what you need to know, what you need to find out is that information, how likely it is whether the event happens, and how likely it is if the event doesn't happen. And then you combine your prior belief with the likelihood of the new information, and then you end up with a posterior belief. And mathematically, it could be a little bit complicated, but the idea is that when you receive information, you should not use just this piece of information to make a decision. You need to combine that piece of information with your prior knowledge, the knowledge you have about the situation before you receive this piece of information. When you combine that, then you have a new piece of knowledge. That's your new prior belief. And then you will receive new information, and then you combine with the prior knowledge, and you keep updating in that way. So that the interesting thing of that is that there are two, the opposites of this is, the opposite extremes is, I've got a belief about something. No, doesn't matter what information you present to me, I will always be stuck to that belief. So that's when you have a prejudice about something, and then no matter what information you receive, you would stick to that. The opposite to that is, you get information, and then now you change your mind based on that piece of information, and that's also not very stable. So the Bayesian approach allows you to combine your prior beliefs to new information, and you change more gradually in your beliefs about situations in the world.
Yeah, and do you think that this approach is something that like the average person can adopt easily, or does it require some more like training or self-discipline to do it?
Yeah, so the technical part is it's a bit complicated, but that's why I'm developing visual aids to make that easier. And if in that case, if you are not looking at the precise values that you want to calculate, and that's why my visual aids have shapes, and the shape tells you what's the probability, but it's not a number, so you don't know exactly the values. Then you can get to that. But that is in terms of the very technical aspect of Bayesian reasoning. But this more broad aspect of combining prior knowledge with new information and combine those and then change gradually, I think that's it's just not difficult to implement. And this goes beyond probabilities. It goes. It can be used in terms of how do I change my views about things, and that is a more rational way of doing things than just stuck to your previous beliefs or just whatever people tell you, then you adopt. So that is easy to implement. The more broad conception of Bayesian reasoning is more easily to implement in everyday life.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that's a super interesting way of going about it, because to me, when I think of decision making, it's more just like make one decision or another. But I feel like it's good to know that there are layers behind how you make a decision as well.
Yeah, indeed.
Yeah. And when it comes to decision making, do you think that trusting your instincts could be another good way to make a decision?
That's a very good question. I would say yes and no, and that comes. The context of this is there is a debate in decision-making research between two very different conceptions. One is the one developed by Daniel Kahneman, who won the Nobel Prize in Economics in 2002, he wrote a book, Think Slow and Fast. It's quite a popular book. So basically, he says that in order to be rational, you need to follow some sort of rational model, mathematical or probabilistic or decision theory, whatever. And then basically he did research and showed that people don't do that. People actually use sort of heuristics, which are shortcuts, and they are biased. That's one tradition of research. The other tradition is that developed by Gerd in the Max Planck Institute in Germany. He says, yes, we do use heuristics, which is shortcuts, but that is the rational thing to do. And basically, that would be the option of just use your instincts, and because you don't have time to make use formal models to make decisions. You need to make decisions under time pressure. And then he says our brain actually evolved over the millions of years of evolution, evolved to make decisions that way. So basically, we are actually rational. Okay, so my view, which is more in line with the Herbert Simons, the one I mentioned before, is that depends on how experts we are in something. So we may be experts in some situations because we acquire knowledge, we spend a lot of time in some field of or some discipline. So we can be very rational in those situations, but not rational in other situations which we don't have knowledge. So when you ask me about trusting your instincts, now if you are expert in a field, typically your instincts will be really good to make decisions. So then you should trust your instincts. Although if you have more time, you can elaborate a bit more, do a more formal process. But if you don't have time, you trust your instincts and the decisions would be good. But in fields in which you are not an expert, then trusting in your instincts would probably not lead to a good decision, because your instincts will not are not based on knowledge that you acquire in the past. So what you are going to come up with is not a good decision. So depends on how expert you are that you should trust your instincts or not. Now, what is it, an expert? Because it may be considered that only that this applies to people who are in the elite of in sports or chess or in other professions. No, there are things that we all become experts in, that they are experts. For example, we all speak one language. So we are experts in the use of that language. And so when you speak a language, you are all the time using your instincts. So when you're speaking in your first language, the words come very easily. It's like, okay, what should I say next? It comes directly to you, and it's probably the right thing to say. When you are when English is not your first language, like my case, perhaps that's not the case. I need to think about what to say, because the what comes to mind is not the right word. So language is one area in everybody is expert in at least one language, and face recognition is another one, because either because that's an innate capacity, or because we are exposed to faces in all the time in our lives, that we become experts in recognizing faces. So that question of instinct becomes with, well, how much experience you have in the field, how much, if you're in the past, you are a person that you are very reflective, that you are observant of things, then you can trust in your instincts, because you have knowledge that in your memory that when you don't have time to make decisions, the first thing that comes typically could be a reasonable thing. But if you don't have, you're not a person that is self-reflective or make observations about behaviors, then perhaps your instincts would not be very good.
Yeah, for sure. And do you think that maybe it's important to take like an objective stance when it comes to deciding if you are an expert in this sort of decision that you're going to be making?
Yeah, so I think we tend to overestimate how experts we are in things.
Yeah.
And so I think you're absolutely right. We need to be very humble and to clearly identify in which parts we are experts or not. But
Yeah.
in some situations, we have to make decisions in everyday life, and that's when shall we use our instincts or not? Well, there is no way there to determine whether objectively whether we are experts or not. So, in some sense, you are the only tool you have to make decisions. So, my suggestion there is, it doesn't matter whether you use intuition, your instincts, or something else in this particular decision. What matters is what's your approach to life in general. If you approach life by trying to observe what others do, trying to observe what you do, and make objective evaluations of what you are, what others are doing, and that will lead to make good decisions in the specific cases. So that's what I say. For the specific case, it's very difficult to give a clear advice what to do, but what's your approach to life? That is, I can say something that very clearly try to self-reflect and evaluate yourself objectively. And when you have that approach, then that will lead to make good decisions when you use your instincts.
Yeah, amazing. Thank you so much for sharing that. And I think we can now jump into our next section, which is our practices experiment debrief. So I'm just going to be asking you about your approaches personally to decision making. So is there a practice that you use in your life to help you with your decision making?
Yeah, so a bit what I was saying about this approach to life. So I'm not to have a specific tool for a specific situation, but an approach to life. And one thing that I did long time ago, it is what I called to have my own ethical system, which was to reflect on what things I think is right to do or wrong, but for me, not a moral system that applies to the whole society. So what things are good and bad for me, and then try to see whether I am following that. So that was a very important exercise that I went through, and it basically shaped my decisions in the future. So yeah, that's something that you don't do in one day or two. It's something that you do it over a number of years, and you reflect on what you think you want to achieve in life, and if you want to achieve that, what are the right things to do to achieve that, and what are wrong things to do to achieve that, and then you make your decisions, your life decisions, based on that ethical system or your personal ethical system, rather than base your decisions on what other people think is right. So
Yeah.
that's one of It's not
Yeah,
a,
no, sorry, you go ahead.
no, so it's not a technique for making
Yeah.
a specific decision, but it is a technique that I use to approach life.
Yeah, I really like that idea of like an ethical process. So does it have like a lot of emphasis on putting yourself first and like what you know is right before anything else or other people?
Yeah, so definitely it's because you've got moral systems like religions and law, and that they tell you something what is good and bad for everyone in society. And so what I decided is that I want to decide myself based on my understanding of the world, and what is right or wrong for me. It's not for others. So maybe something that for me is wrong. I don't think that for others would be wrong, but it would be for me because of the information I have, the opportunities I had, and then, for example, wasting my time would be something wrong. For me, I don't think that is definitely something wrong for others, but that's wrong for me. And then I try not to do it, and I fail a lot. But as I said at the beginning, I try to put myself quite challenging goals, and
Yeah.
then I do quite well, but I don't achieve those goals, but I still feel okay because I knew that I was putting a lot of pressure to me. So yes, it is putting yourself, and not in a selfish way that you don't care about others. It's just you don't want to impose things to others, and you don't want others to impose things to you. But that doesn't mean that you don't care about others, because part of that personal ethical system could be that it is important for you to help others, or to not be not require the help of others. So try to solve your problems so others don't have to waste their time to help you.
Yeah. Yeah, so it's like a pretty subjective process, I guess. It's like,
Definitely, yes.
yeah.
And
So would you say it's a lot to do with like what you believe personally, despite what other people might think?
absolutely, yeah, it has to do with that. And but again, it's because it's personal. It applies to you. It doesn't apply to others.
Yeah.
And so it's because I would be uncomfortable if what I believe is wrong for me, that I try to impose that to others. That would be selfish. And but so when you've got a subjective approach, but it applies to you, that's perfectly okay, at least in my belief system.
Yeah, amazing. And do you think that there are challenges to this approach as well?
Yeah. So the challenge is that sometimes you're not you don't conform to what the society expects from you, and so that's the main challenge. Now, when I was younger, I was trying to my ideas were quite different than the normal, and then when you go and you become experienced in life after many years, then you realize, well, you cannot be so yes or white. Things are not white or black, black or white. They are grays, and then you have to compromise. So if you are still the you've got in the background what you think is good or bad, and you are going towards that goal, you still have to compromise, and don't feel too bad about that, because you live in a society, and then you have to um, sometimes do things that are not exactly what you believe is right, but they are perfectly okay for society. So that is the challenge, but that's why you need to be flexible in the things you can be flexible within your system, and not be flexible in other things. And that's something that is, there are not easy ways of doing that, but in general, when you follow your belief system, you are happier. You feel that your things that are doing things that are right, and then you're achieving things in that system, not what others think you should achieve, and that allows you to be happy with yourself.
Yeah, I really like the way you put that about, personal happiness and like finding what makes you happy. And I think that, like you said, life experience takes years to accumulate. So as you get more experience, there's always going to be more things that are thrown into the mix that might make decision making more challenging as well.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, brilliant. And do you like find certain times where you like to like do this practice, or do you just find that it happens subconsciously, like you're always trying to make decisions based on your values or your beliefs?
Yes, not particular time. So, and as I said, at some point in life, I spend a lot of time developing this belief system, this personal ethical system, and then it's part of my everyday life. So it's not something that I think about it. So that's, again, remember when we're talking about your instincts or your habits.
Yeah.
Yes, at some point you have to spend a lot of time in developing things, and then things become more automatic in the future. Um, so in order to be able to trust in your instincts, you need to do the hard work at the beginning. So yeah, currently, no, it's something that happens quite automatically.
Yeah, amazing. And thank you for sharing that and your experience with us as well. I'd like to move into our open mic section now. So, this is
Yes.
basically where you have a chance to talk about anything you'd like to talk about. You could expand upon what we've already said today or talk about anything you'd like.
Yes, thank you for that opportunity. And yes, so I think I'd like to expand on that. That personal ethical system, and which, because I think that that's the best way that everybody can contribute to society. So um, when you make try to make good decisions, um, you become more self-reliant, so you need less help from others. When you are happy yourself, then again you require less help from others, and that is, I believe, the best way to contribute to society. It's not big things that we should aspire to do. It is just making good decisions, making an effort to make good decisions, educating yourself, and being humble and being objective and trying to improve yourself all the time. And that will lead to good decisions. And when everybody individually is making good decisions, the society improves. And that is a message, perhaps, that when you give me this open mic opportunity is this, that by self-improving objectively, and being humble, and making good evaluations of what you are, that is a huge contribution to society. And that I like, to put that message forward.
Yeah, beautiful. And I think that's the perfect way to end today's episode as well. I'd love to just leave everyone with that to think about, because there's also thinking about yourself and the decisions you're making, but also how that helps society in a broader sense. Once you're focusing on what's really important to you and what aligns with your values, it'll naturally have a more positive effect on what's around you.
Yes, absolutely. That's the idea.
Yeah, great. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. And that also brings us to the end of today's episode. But for those who want to find out more about you, where can they go?
Okay, so if you Google my name, that you will have a lot of information. I also have a YouTube channel, and that has all my lectures in statistics that I give. So there are more than 120 videos, and that includes Bayesian statistics. So again, you can just Google my name, and you can find my YouTube channel.
Great, thank you so much. And we also have Guillermo's details in the descriptions below. But to everyone listening, please don't forget to like and subscribe on whatever platform you're on, and we'll see you guys next time. You have been listening to Work in Progress, the Personal Productivity Science Insights podcast produced by the Life Management Science Labs. Listen to episodes from LMSL's 10 Life Management Perspectives on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, or other podcasting apps on your smartphone. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider rating our show, sharing it, and subscribing to our channel, as it helps other people find it and us grow to bring you more quality resources. More of our work can be found on our website pp.lmsl.net, where you can join our movement. I'm Joanna. Thanks for tuning in.